Hello and welcome to the Petticoated Swashbuckler. My name is Maren and I'm getting ready for a bit of lacy sewing. Hi, so I'm currently recreating the inventory of an 18th century Englishwoman named Bamford, Mrs. Anne Bamford. I will link her inventory down below. It's in the Lewis Walpole archives, and it consists of more than 200 items of various wearing apparel, from big gowns to tiny bits and pieces of silk and lace. And I've made a bit of both lately, and I'm currently hooked on accessories, and I thought, you know, let's go through her inventory and see what kind of accessories she has. Take aprons, for example. She lists a lot of aprons, 30 aprons I counted. There is one apron, 17 aprons of different sorts valuable, 3 muslin and lawn worked 2 aprons, 2 old muslin aprons, 2 cloth aprons, 1 worked apron, muslin apron laced round, 1 worked apron, muslin apron and muslin handkerchief. So I thought, why not make a couple of aprons? I'm specifically interested in making one of the worked aprons because I've seen some illustrations, beautiful illustrations of women wearing very thin, almost see-through sort of silk organza or organdy aprons, very beautiful, with lots of embroideries and lace on them. Now I don't want to embroider on silk organza because I don't hate myself that much, to be honest. So what I thought I would do is I will see if I can find some nice lace that can sort of be pieced up or like cut into different pieces, and I can sort of applique that on the apron, because I don't know if the 18th century, I know that throughout history it's been fairly common to, you know, have, if you need something embroidered, need might be a strong word, but if you want something embroidered, you sort of set it out to an embroiderer who will, you know, embroider everything you need, and then you get it back. You cut out the pieces as you want them, whether it's a waistcoat or something else, and then you sew it up. So I thought, you know, not, again, you know, historically accurate, historically not accurate, historically plausible, that you could buy finished embroidery and applique it onto something else. So that's what I'm going to do. And I do have my trusty American Duchess book that does include a pattern for, an organza apron. Look, it's very nice, with nice sort of lace around and some nice sort of beading lace at the top. So I'm not sure I'll follow the pattern sort of, you know, completely. Maybe not. We'll see. But I also thought about there's a lot of muslin aprons, and especially the one that's a muslin apron and handkerchief, because handkerchief, I mean, I'm used to handkerchief being sort of small piece of fabric that you blow your nose in, but 18th century handkerchiefs, and they are also specified in the inventory, are usually for wearing. I mean, she does list a lot of handkerchiefs as well. There are 42 handkerchiefs in the inventory as far as I can tell. There are 5 handkerchiefs of different sorts for wearing. There is a striped muslin handkerchief, 2 handkerchiefs all of lace. There's a black lace, black silk lace handkerchief to cover with, handkerchief in the paper box, and worked handkerchiefs. In addition to all the handkerchiefs that are just listed as handkerchiefs or handkerchiefs of various sorts. Now, I do already have a very pretty printed muslin handkerchief that I got from a friend of mine for Christmas, and I've actually worn it quite a lot. It's from Burnley and Thoroughbridge, yes, and it's a reproduction, and it's gorgeous. It's so lovely. It's gorgeous and it's so lovely, and I've worn it a lot. But I thought it would be nice to make one together with a muslin apron, so a muslin apron and a muslin handkerchief, maybe with a little lace sort of round the edge. Now the handkerchief I'm going to make super simple, just a triangle, maybe with like a slit for the neck to make it easier to like drape it around my neck. But as for the apron, I have dug out my trusty costume close-up book. If it looks horrible, it's because my cat spilled a lot of water on it. So it's really, look at the poor book. It's so beaten up, but you know, we managed to dry it out, so that's good. They have an apron from 1770 to 1785, so it's, you know, fairly late in the period, and it looks like this. And it's got a very nice sort of bib with a pointed bit down at the front, which I think will be very flattering and nice. Now this apron is made from a block printed cotton. I'm just gonna make it from a plain white cotton muslin. I think it'll be nice. So that's what we're doing. We're making a couple of lacy, beautiful aprons and handkerchiefs. Want to come along? I started with the handkerchief, cutting it out from a piece of cotton muslin that I had left over from a Regency dress I made last spring. After having cut a triangle that was, you know, fairly straight on the grain where it's supposed to be, and on the bias where it's supposed to be, I marked out the split at the center back at my neck. I just marked it with pins, pinned along the folded edge, and cut it open. I didn't want a big split, so I just cut, I think, 8 centimeters, something like that. I then found the lace that I wanted to edge this with. It's a very nice cotton lace. I'll link down below where I bought it. The hemming was done by folding the edges in about 0.5 centimeter and basting them down, and then folding that again, just sort of rolling it with my fingers. I did not pin or baste this. I sort of just rolled it and held it in place with my thumb and my fingers, where I, you know, as I went along, and just stitched it down using a hem stitch. I tried to make the stitches as small as possible, even though, you know, in retrospect, it wouldn't have mattered that much because this will all be covered with the lace later. The split were hemmed in the same way, just sort of petered out towards the point and just casting over that edge to keep it from fraying. I then stitched the lace in place with just small running stitches, very small on the front and then longer on the back, which, you know, makes for an almost invisible seam on lace. I just sew the lace straight on without any tucks or sort of gatherings, except at the points where I made a few tucks just to make it lie nicely around the point. And with the lace on, the neckerchief was done, and it was time to move on to the first apron, the muslin apron. I cut the skirt and the bib and just hemmed both the same way I hemmed the neckerchief, by folding over, basting, folding again, and hem stitching. Removing the basting stitches, you end up with a very small, very neat and quite pretty little hem. The skirt of the apron is cut with a sort of dip at the front that's going to be gathered onto the bib. So I've just sewn gathering threads along that line, and then the rest of the skirt that's not dipped is going to be just gathered onto the waistband, so they have got separate gathering threads. And I always like to make 2 rows of gathering threads, just to, you know, I feel like that gives me nicer, more even, and also more sort of not sturdy, but yeah, nice gathers. I then went and measured how long, you know, how much do I need to gather that pointy bit at the front. Just pulled up the gathering threads until I was happy with the length. The rest of the skirt, I kind of eyeballed it. I measured around my waist and then gathered it to what I thought would be the right length. You know, it wasn't too bad. It was okay. By the way, I always like to use pins when I do gathers. I sort of wind my gathering threads onto a pin, and that, I find that makes it very easy to sort of adjust the gathers if you need to gather them more, if you need to loosen them up a bit, and it also, you know, it's easy to remove them once you've sewn your gathers in place. So that's just my sort of handy tip of the day. The waistband is tiny. According to the Costume Close-Up book, it's 1/2 inch. It's very, 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 very narrow. And I always like to have my aprons close at the front, at the side, and this was not unheard of in the 18th century. So that's why I'm sort of measuring out so that I have, you know, a little bit of apron string on the side where I want to tie it, and then a longer string on the other side that goes around my body and ties at the front side. I then pin my waistband to my gathered apron skirt. The waistband goes along the top of the entire skirt, and then the bib is attached to the waistband as far as I can tell. So I'm just going in, pinning, making sure the gathers look nice and even. I then whip stitched the waistband to the bib, to the apron skirt with tiny whip stitches, and trying to make sure that I actually catch every gather so that I can remove my gathering threads later on and not have like pieces of the gathers fall out. I mean, this is how insanely tiny the waistband is once you've folded all the raw edges in and folded it over. I mean, it's more like string than, ties or ribbons, I think, which I suppose is fine. I mean, you don't want to waste fabric where you don't need it, and you don't really need more than a string. But as you can see, absolutely tiny. And I just pinned it down and hem stitched it in place. And now I don't really pay that much attention to the gathers anymore, because I've already caught those with my whip stitches. So now I'm just making nice and even hem stitches on the back side. Stitching the waistband to the apron skirt, as well as just stitching them close, took some time, but it was fairly simple work, and the result is it's growing on me. The apron strings, I folded them in half, folded the raw edges in, and I'm just whip stitching those closed with tiny little whip stitches. And I like them. They're very practical, and they look very cute because they're so tiny. With the bib hemmed, the skirt hemmed, and the waistband in place, it's time to attach the two. The dip of the skirt goes with the point of the bib, and that's just that little bit there is that's the only bit where the skirt and the bib attaches. So it's not much. I found the easiest way to do it. I just right sides together, pinning the bib to the waistband. I just whip stitch that in place. I think that's what's been done on the original, and it's a sensible thing to do, to attach the two. I found it easiest to sort of start at the top of one side and sew down to the point, and then turn the whole thing and sew from the point up the other side. And the only really fiddly bit was trying to make sure the point was actually, look nice and sort of even on both sides. and with my bib and my skirt securely attached to each other, that apron is done, and it's time to move on to the last and possibly most complex apron. I began by measuring out and cutting out a piece of silk organza, silk organza. It's got a beautiful stiffness to it, but you know, it's like practically invisible on my white cutting table. I then measured and cut the lace that goes on the bottom of the apron, and also the beading lace that goes on top of the apron. Hemming, more hemming, done the same way. Fold the edge, baste it down, fold it once again, and then hem stitch, sort of rolling it in your fingers as you go. I suppose it's almost like a mix between the rolled hem and just a very, very tiny hem. You could work it as both. I then attached my beading lace to the top. This is the best beading lace I could find. Ideally, I would have wanted one that wasn't so, I don't know, rustic? Is that the word I'm looking for? But this one does the trick beautifully, and I've actually grown to quite like it. As you can see, I'm just whip stitching it over the top of the apron, and then went in back and sort of whip stitched the bottom of it as well. I mean, that's the nice thing about silk organdy. It's so see-through that you don't really, you know, this is the back of my work, but I can really see what's going on, you know, at the front of my work. So this is the embroidered lace for the hem of the apron, and I just hemmed the side of it very quickly, simply. And then I sewed it onto my apron hem. I didn't hem the bottom of the apron, by the way, because I knew I was going to attach lace there. I'm just using a running stitch, and I didn't want that much of the sort of net that the lace is embroidered onto, so that's why I'm attaching it to the apron, you know, as close to the embroidered pattern as possible. I cut away excess net and organza. And I then went in and cut away half the seam allowance on the sort of top side, the silk side, not the lace side. And folding over, encasing all the raw edges, I pinned this little hem, we call it a hem? A seam, this little seam in place. I then hem stitched the seam allowance down, just encasing all raw edges and securing that seam so it's even sturdier. Now I I had quite a lot of the lace left, and I wanted to use this to applique onto the apron, which meant I had to cut out these little embroidered flower bouquets from the net, the lace net. The apron is now, you know, in theory it's done. I've even threaded some ribbon through the beading lace on the top. But I really want to use my little pieces of lace embroidery to applique onto my apron. So I just laid my apron out and started to sort of play around with placement, with where I could position the pieces. I cut my pieces in different sizes, so you can see it's sort of different pieces, different bits of the lace. And when I was happy with the pattern on the apron, I went in and I pinned them in place. Stitching them in place was a little bit fiddly because there wasn't that much to sort of stitch into in the applique pieces, but I think I managed to do it. I did not use an applique stitch. I don't know what I would call this stitch. It's a sort of whip stitch come blanket stitch come applique method, but it works okay. It's not very visible. I used white silk thread, so it sort of blends quite nicely. And with all of those pieces appliqued on, the apron is done, and it's time to take all our new lacy, white, elegant little accessories for a walk in the snow, I think.
I'm really happy with these pieces. The handkerchief took me 10.5 hours to make, and the lace cost me about 250 Norwegian kroner. The muslin apron cost me nothing because I used scraps of muslin from earlier projects, but it took me 17.5 hours to sew. And the silk apron cost me 500 Norwegian kroner, and it took me 21 hours to sew. And I can't wait to use them with all the nice things I'm going to make this year. But until next time, bye!